Hey everybody, my name is Jay Bowen with Bowen ECM Solutions. I'm going to show you migration software today. Going to run through this slide deck as quickly as I can, maybe about 5 minutes. Just give you a few basic concepts about the software, what it does. And this is for migrating content management systems from FileNet, OnBase, Documentum, OpenText, a few other brands of flavors that are out there. Let's get started. So a little bit about Bowen ECM Solutions based out of Cleveland, Ohio, United States. Experience with Alfresco, FileNet, Island, OnBase, OpenText, and other ECM platforms. In-house .NET and Java coding resources. Average about 5 managed migrations per year. Largest migration to date is about 1.6 billion documents. And we're not counting pages there. Those are actual document objects. If we're looking at pages, that'd be like times 10. BECM Migration Software Competitive Advantage. Zero code, zero scripting. This is point and click. What you see is what you get. Experience agile, internally developed software without dependencies on third parties. Live migration, zero impact to existing systems, so you don't need to dump everything out, then import everything in or factor into business operations what you're doing on the migration side. Granularity to target specific data and queue in the order you desire. Split data across categories or merge into a single category. You may have a content management system where you have a couple different types that you need to merge together into one destination target location. You may have a single source that you need to split up into multiple different types in the destination system. So with the software you can do that. Automated and unattended process export, transform, and import documents. Scalability and flexibility. We support vertical scaling and horizontal scaling, multiple CPUs or scaling up multiple hosts. Included with the solutions reporting and automated job monitoring. That's usually delivered via email. So migration software, the basics. You have a source ECM system, a destination ECM system. You're going to add repositories, which are libraries, from the source and destinations. You're going to create a job map. That's what's connecting the two items together, not just the repositories, but you're specifying the type. And then you're going to map the property fields together, depending on which content management product you're talking about. Sometimes they're attributes, they're properties, or fields. They're metadata definitions that are associated to a type of document or just a place to store metadata that describes the content itself. And then you're going to save it. From there, you're going to use the batch manager, the user interface, to create batches. So the first step is creating a map. Second step is using the batch manager to queue. And with the queuing feature, you can select the data that you want. If you only want to go back 7 years, if you want to partition data, if you want to go from newest to oldest, if you want to work by line of business, you can do that with the software. Background jobs will export the data, convert and translate, and then import into the target system. The import phase, that can also be to disk or just dumping out. Migration software consists of 3 modules, which are the user interface, the workflow system, and then the agent. The user interface is where you're going to do your data mappings and your transformations or defining those jobs. You can also manage the in-flight work with this tool. The workflow system, this is basically the back end, the repository, is a small utility database that the system's using to persist items in state. And then the third component is the agent command line interface. This usually runs in the background. You don't normally see it. In this demonstration, I'm going to show you on screen so we have something to look at and we can see the work taking place. And that's the component that's scalable. You do normally run that at multiple hosts. A little bit about the architecture for Migration Station. It's a client server, the utility database that's persisting that data that we just talked about. Multi-threaded per process instance and can run multiple instances itself and scale out to multiple servers. The multi-threading and also just the batch mechanisms through APIs when they're supported. For instance, FileNet has a batch retrieval mechanism. We're not just multi-threading single threads and requesting one document at a time. We're requesting a batch of documents, and then we get that batch back. We will parallel process the return results. So the parallel process runs simultaneously. Segments work in batches. So if we had a large unit of work, if we had a large ECM system, say 100 million documents, and there was 1 million documents of a certain type that we wanted to migrate and target, out of that 1 million documents, we can't just export 1 million, try to import 1 million. That really wouldn't be wise or efficient. So what we do is we take that 1 million, we break it down to batches. You define the batch size. Something, 1,000 documents, 10,000 documents, that's going to be your batch. And that's a unit of work. We're just taking that large class of documents, that 1 million, creating all those batches of 10,000, storing that in the database, and the database is working at a batch at a time. You could have multiple exporters, multiple PDF converters, and multiple importers. So here you see a little architecture where we have some databases, some content management systems. We have our worker nodes, bots, agents. We have the SQL Server database, email notification, SMTP that gets sent out. The export location, we're using a scratch pad or a temporary sandbox area where we pull data out from content management systems. We'll push it to disk. At the same time that those items are being pushed to disk, other worker nodes are picking it up and transforming it. Same time as well in parallel. Those documents, after they're converted, they're then pushed over here. So this is a parallel asynchronous process that as soon as something's exported, multiple workers are looking to pick it up. Multiple workers are also looking for the next state of the batch to ingest it. And that's a typical workflow, would be like a ETL: extract, transform, and load. On the extraction phase, built-in tools to extract the taxonomy, including security levels, doc types, and field usage. So for FileNet systems especially, something very rich in taxonomy and metadata. Part of your project, outside of just migrating data, is you have to understand what's in the source system. You also, even though something's defined, you don't know how often it's used. Maybe it's associated to a doc class. There's a million documents, but it's only used 5% of the time. You probably don't need that field. Beyond that, what we commonly do when you're approaching a migration project is you would look at your settings and your administrative tools to say, well, this field, this item type, whatever property you want to call it or field, it's 30 characters long. What you don't know is if 6 months ago or 6 years ago, that field was 100 characters long. So what really matters is you need to go analyze the database and do queries and get these reports for you. That's what the software will do. It will go out and go generate data reports based on field usages for all the documents in your system, telling you how many documents you have, the percent population of where it's not null, and also the maximum length for the single largest value, but also the maximum number of elements for any multi-value fields that are there. In addition, we're also breaking out security. We're going to show you all the different access levels, and you're going to be able to bring that back as a report. You can easily export 1.5 million documents per day using a simple gigabit connection to modest hardware. Nothing fancy. You could scale that up. Documents, what really determines the speed or performance of the system when we talk about documents, if these were all encyclopedias, they're going to be much slower. If it's a single page check image, going to be very high. These are average documents here. These could be 5-10 page documents, and we're getting 1.5 million documents today on 10-year-old hardware. You define your data set for the type examples, optionally applying filters and priority. All documents last 7 years, exclude based on metadata. This is the part where you're in charge or controlling what you want to migrate. If you want to go get it all, great. You don't have to think about this. But oftentimes we work with customers and they have restrictions. They don't want any version greater than 50. They want certain doc types. They want to merge documents that are related together or migrate them together. Or separate business units. You might be moving data from one common place in your source system, but in the destination you're going to start putting data by doc type or item type into certain categories in the target. The documents are exported in batches like we talked about earlier, breaking down work into a manageable unit, and each batch contains documents for migration. We're going to export it, convert it, import it. The metadata file or the INX file stores the information about the document key value pair format. Been a number of years, worked with a lot of different formats, XML, binary, JSON notation, but this is the simplest, most portable way of storing metadata from these different content management systems. So key value pair, and the key would be the field or the property name, a delimiter, and then the value or values after that. So that's what's contained in the INX file. Some notes here, some content management systems store each page of a document as a single file. So what you'll see is that there'll be multiple files for every page. So if we have a 10-page document, you're going to see 10 different documents here, and then you're going to see one PDF. Some content management systems allow the developer to set the file name or the extension and the MIME type, which is may or may not be correct. And what will happen in millions and billions of documents, you can be guaranteed you're going to come across a case where we attempt to export a document out and name the document with what the system, the content management system says that it is, but those characters are not allowed on the file system. So we clean those characters, and the INX file is storing the information we'll receive through content management system. So if you're missing an extension, if the MIME type is wrong, if this is a nefarious file name that's not allowed, it will certainly be allowed to be stored in the INX file. But you'll also have some other tools in the next slide here I'll show you. The transformation phase. Getting data and documents from A to B is simple, but metadata management is complicated. This is really where your work is going to be for someone who's doing the migration. It's not how many documents you have, it's how many migration jobs or job maps do you need to define. If a customer has 1 billion documents on one type, and you're going to go to a target system and it's one type, you really only have to do that one time, and the computer is going to do the rest of the work. Conversely, if a customer has 1,000 different doc types and you're going to map those all into your target system, you have to define them 1,000 times, those job maps. That's where the bulk of the work is going to be, and then from there you end up with any conflicts on the metadata fields. So the tool is very easy, very good to work with as far as connecting metadata fields together. You can between the source and destination system with same or different names, with different cardinality, single versus list. If you want to take a single field and merge it to a list, if you're taking a list and merging it to single, you can do that. These all have to abide by the constraints of the target system when you're extracting things. So if the target system can handle it, the tool's merging and formatting the data as it should. You can merge the fields, you can split the fields, value processing. This is where, if you look at other tools that are online and other demonstration, maybe even other YouTube videos, I think all good or strong content management tools are going to have a mature transformation step. Our transformation is set at the property level individually for each migration map. So if you're splitting a certain type, but you have to do 3 migrations, you want to map the doc type from one value to another for each of those 3 separate migrations. You could do that with the software. You can replace characters, map values, which is like a lookup or transformation, key value pairs, clean strings, trim white space, remove nefarious characters, and insert default values. The feature set that we have here is easy drag drop properties between systems or import from a text file. So in the case where you have something that's repeatable, or you're just going to do something n number of times, you could save that mapping in a text file so that when you select your source and target system and you do your initial association together, you can import that text file. That'll map the properties together, click save. That will complete your work, or you can also adjust from there. You can split and merge property support. Very important feature. So in our source system, we could take one property to many destination properties. We can also do many properties from the source system and associate them and merge them to a target property. Ability to copy and paste existing transformation to other properties. So if you spent a long time tweaking the work that you did, you want to right click and copy it, you can paste it into the software. A little bit more in transformation examples, and this is our transformation editor here. Default value, insert when null. Map value, so it's a key value pair lookup, and here's an example. If it's Bitcoin, then e-currency. So here's our payment choice pop-up values. In our target system, we have check, ACH, wire transfer, credit card, e-currency, third party. Over here, it's almost the same, but it's enough that it's going to break. If we try to migrate Bitcoin, it's not going to work. It needs to map over to e-currency. So here in the substitution values, you just do a file import or drag drop of a text delimited list, import it in there, and again, this is the per property. If you have 1,000 values, if you have 5,000 values, that's fine. You're going to import it and save it in here. And this property here is from the source system, incoming transmittal number, destination properties, transmittal number. Maximum length, trim white space, leading, trailing, and greater than 1 instance in a string. So if you had a couple characters together, a couple words together in a property field, but there's 4 spaces, you want to remove 4 spaces with just 1 space, you could do that. Substitution values, there's also regular expressions. For substitution values, we also have char cleaning. We can go through the string and replace individual characters, not just the entire field. We have allowed characters, that's cleaning and looking for things, anything just to exclude, whereas this one is a map. Regex, as I mentioned. Transformations all work in conjunction, so it's not one or the other. These are all together. And automatic typecast between types. So if you have a source system and the data stored as an integer, and then in the target system, for whatever reason, you're like, well, we don't need an integer, we just want it to be a string, or we want to merge the field. That would be an example of casting between systems. So you're going from int to string. And then you have also other examples where if it's a string in the source system, but it is a supported date format, and it's a date format in the target system, and you want to map to a date field, you could do that. Of course, anytime when something you can't cast, doesn't matter what programming language it is, if you can't convert from one type to another because it's not supported, I mean, it's not a legitimate format for the value, like you can't put A in an integer field. So as long as you don't have any case like that, this will happen automatically for you and parse the value. A little bit more on the content transformation features that are here. Here's an example of an exported document. Here's our batch. Here's our item. In here we have 3 pages of a document. We have our PDF. The PDF is created from these 3. So the document occurs once in the source content management system, but the content is a list. And with that list, it's storing 3 pages or as pointers for those 3 pages of content. And that's what this PDF is for. That's is after transformation. We have the log of the transformation. Everything's happened to this document, INX or metadata. So some of these conversions, they're not just limited to just image file type conversions. Sometimes we have cold formats where we need to take these documents and convert them to PDF or decompress them. We have the ability to detect headers in the file when documents do not have extensions to determine the type. This is very commonplace out of a large repository, especially, let's just use FileNet for example. FileNet doesn't care about the file name. FileNet uses the MIME type, which is a property of the document object, to determine whether or not it can view the file with its built-in viewer. In addition to that, the content elements, plural, each of them have a MIME type property. Along with that, they have a file name. But again, FileNet doesn't care about the file name, it uses the MIME type. So it'd be very common to have a working system, everything looks good, but now you export the documents and you don't get an extension, and you're like, well, what's happening? Why is that the case? And you can verify this with admin tools, and you'll see some documents may not have an extension there. It could be 1% of your total population. It could be a bigger number. People don't realize this until they actually go to migrate. And trust me, anything that's ever been done to your content management system, you'll find out when you migrate it. We also have tools to convert proprietary formats into current and standard image or PDF files. So you might have some high density CAL or proprietary FileNet compressed images. We also convert Office documents to PDF as an option, and then we can calculate the MD5 checksum of the file itself and do verification after import. So on the import phase, multi-threaded import per instance of the application configurable by the migration user. If you only want to run 1 importer, you want to run 5 on the same host. Some of our importers, you define the number of threads per instance. Sometimes you can break that out so that there's multiple instances that are running concurrently in the same host, and certainly break that out to other machines. Multi-threaded import per instance of application configurable by the migration user. You could define this in the database settings, or you can also run multiple instances of the importers themselves. You can direct traffic to a load balance URL or to certain nodes within a clustered system. Reports show the time duration for the batch ingestion for where the process is running from. Only error documents or related versions are skipped up to the user-defined limit. Here's a good example. If we had 5 documents and on version 3 we ran into an error, we can't import version 4 and 5. You can't insert versions in content management systems. They don't work that way. So what we want to do is we want 3 to end up in an error. Version 4 and 5 should also have a note saying we couldn't import because version 3 had a problem. And then you can address this by editing the INX file, metadata file. That's our not proprietary, but our key value pair text file that is stored in the file system. So if you have just a one-off, you can do a quick fix. Or you can do something a little bit on a larger side. You can change your target field. You're going to get good debug error stacks to identify the root cause. It's going to tell you moving data into field A. Field A doesn't allow the value you're trying to put into it. It's too long, or it's null and it requires a value. And then once you fix that as a migration operator, you can retry the batch. Anything that was already imported, the system's already going to know that, and it's going to skip over those documents, and then it's just going to retry the ones that failed. All imported documents have their unique identifiers tracked in the migration database. This is great for reconciliation. You want to know from your source system what node ID or what value you have, what GUID or ID, and then when you migrate it into your target system, you're going to have that same list in the same table side by side, so you can easily reconcile them together. A few options here on the release format. We can release to the file system, FileNet, OpenText, SharePoint, and other ECM platforms. And we also have an option where you can consume our APIs to retrieve the exported content and translated data. Maybe you just have a total one-off, whatever system it is, instead of having us build tools or connectors for you. You want to do that on your own. You can easily consume our APIs to get batches, and the data is going to be on disk. It's just metadata and content, very easy to work with. A little bit on the reporting side. The reports are configured to set up every 30 minutes. You define really the interval. But we're going to get a high level, this is a little bit of older report. You're going to get the queue counts, the status and processing statistics. You're going to get the drive space of the migration directories. We don't want to overflow. That happens. If we had a 10 terabyte system, we don't need a 10 terabyte share. We're not trying to dump everything out to disk. We only need like a 2 terabyte slice. We need that sandbox we talked about earlier. We're going to push data there, and as data is pushed there, we're going to be pushing it then into your target system. And after that's done, we have bots or agents that are going out and cleaning batches that are completed. We don't need that data sitting on disk. So there's jobs that go out and prune that. There have been times in the past where maybe a customer does want to push a lot of data to a staged area, but not import until a later time. What we can't do is we can't overflow our target directories. So there's some monitoring built in. Watch those directories. If we get down to less than a couple gigs of space, processes will pause, and then they'll keep checking every 10 minutes to see if space has been cleared up, and then they'll resume. Along with the monitoring, we have metrics here. We want to know if we were exporting, how long it takes, if we're importing, how long, and also for our transformations, PDF and translated metadata fields. We also have alerts. So the reporting is great. This is usually like steady state when you're into a project, the first week, towards the end of the week or the following week. You're just going to start getting these. You might be pretty much in tune looking at these often, but then as more time goes on with the project, you really only need to look at these maybe once a day, maybe every other day, and you're just going to keep getting numbers from the system because everything works fairly reliably here. But more important than the monitoring that you're doing ad hoc, where you're going to get another email in your inbox, you're going to get alerts. Now these are calls for action. An alert is when a process fails or shuts down due to too many errors, and it includes a task being executed. So if we're doing our workflow task of export or import or PDF conversion, it's going to include that in the subject line. It's also going to include which host was running. It's also going to include a description or an error stack of what the problem was when it ran into, and it's going to say gracefully shutting. A little competitive advantages here. I won't go into all these. There's a high number of them. Hopefully you guys will see the software and see the value here, and we'll make this file available for you to take a look online. Okay, so with that, let's get started with the software demonstration portion. And first thing I'm going to do here is I want to launch the Migration Station Batch Manager. So Batch Manager application, this only takes a couple minutes to install. This is a .NET app 4.8 framework. But I'm going to go here to settings. I'm going to click on edit. And first thing is just what common settings do I have here? I have some allowed characters, and then I have title characters. Difference between it. These are just defaults. These are templates. We have a batch size. I made it very small here so we can see what this looks like in the file system. Check existing versions, export multi-thread, the number of threads to run. We have our delimiter defined here. Export location, this is our batch directory, that sandbox area we're going to push things to. LDAP map path, you might have existing LDAP users from your source system that don't exist in your new environment, and you want to translate those values, so that's a global way of doing it here. We have some SMTP settings for reports. We have some OpenText retry intervals and time to live for sessions, object exporter path, do we want to convert items, how many threads, SharePoint sleep time, that's kind of a unique thing. And then the last part is this stop time. When do we want to stop, if we want to stop per day. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to go over here to migration. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to just add libraries. And you're going to add, like for instance, here I already have my library set up. I'm going to add a FileNet library. And I already have this set up to my URL. You're going to enter your URL. What you need here is a web service interface to FileNet. You also need a database connection. 99% of what we're doing here is all going to be API. Certainly anytime we create or export, everything's all API related. But for reports, we do need a database connection. I'm going to click log on here. And once I'm logged in, I need to enter a database string or a connection string for each object store. Now this system has 2 object stores as my test. You're going to select your driver type here, and then there's an option here to skip it. You don't have to register these. But what I'm doing is I'm registering libraries, as I mentioned before. I already have my library set up. The next thing that you're going to do is go to add libraries, and we were doing a on-base migration, so you'd click on on-base library. It's the exact same thing. That's your connection. It's going to validate the web service. Now that I have the repositories defined, now I need to create a job map and connect the 2 systems together. So here we're going to go from FileNet to OpenText. I can click on a job map. This one already exists. And you can see here that this is coming from the object store FNOS1, invoices, OpenText, destination category, at least the initial category is going to be invoices, and then I gave this map a name. Let me show you how to create a new map. Add new. Selected my first object store. Click on invoices. Some other advanced features that are here, but for now I'm just going to create this JS demo property map. Actually put invoices in there. I'm going to go to the destination system, put my root category node that's in there, and then I'm going to select my OpenText system, the root category, and then we're going to go to demos, invoices. This gives me the attributes for that, a little information about it. I click save here. And here's my map that I just created. That was a way to connect my source object store, doc class, to my target OpenText system and choose this category attribute type. Now what I can do is I can add a secondary map here. Basically I can add more categories. Very common to do with OpenText is you're going to add more categories here. But let's just start with one and I'll show you how this works. So everything here that you see that already has a sub-item, it has a sub-item because the target category matched the name as the source. And so that was automatic. We try to do camel case, we change camel case and symbolic and display names. We're trying to match as much as possible on these target names, and we'll change these to lowercase. And here's an example. ID doesn't match F and ID, but if I want to associate these 2 fields together, I can do that. Now I just created a property map at this level. And now when I'm on this level, now I can click on Edit Value Map. So if we click it, after I've associated ID to this field here and these other properties are connected, anything in red means that the target system requires a value. Now I know that payment method also has certain types or a pop-up or a controlled value list. So I'm going to edit the value map there. Here I can insert a default value, apply regular expressions, change the length of characters. I can define the allowed characters for that field, so anything that doesn't match will just get removed. Replacement strings and the substitution values themselves. I'm going to go ahead and click on load the map file. And then here I have a invoice payment method. This is already set up. So if it's Bitcoin, it's e-currency. I'm going to load this. And so here's a substitution or a controlled value list lookup. So if the source value is equal to this individual value, we will replace it with this one over here on the right hand side. You have here in the editor which properties you're updating, so you know what changes you're making. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel on this one. So that's everything you need to do to set up 2 systems together. Normally you might have a lot of different job maps here. This one's already ready to go for me, the invoice demo map. I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy. Next step, we're going to go to Batch Manager, and this is where you're actually going to queue items into your system. I'm going to click on my source system. Notice here that this value is red. This means that I have a job map exists for this item and I don't have anything for the others. I'm going to click on Invoices. This is just bringing back a preview of the data or a sample from the FileNet system. Just, it's in scope. It's defining the data by type. I could see here the query. If I wanted to partition and queue things here different, that's where I would do this at. If I go to the job manager, I can fetch some other batches that are here, go to properties about the class itself, and tells me some information. I'm going to go back over to FileNet, click on this one, go to batches, and I'm going to create batches. Now what I could do here is export the documents, or I could import directly. So if I just want to do a query and export my results and come back and compare, I could do that. The maps, this is the map that I defined earlier that's associated to the class. You could have multiple job maps per class. I do want to point that out. So you can use the batch as a name. If you're partitioning a single set of data to multiple sets, you might say set 1, set 2, or splitting across business units, department A, department B. There's no need to do that. It's just a feature of the tool. And then over here we have the selector of where do you want to take these documents and put them into OpenText. So here I want to go ahead and put them into migration demo. And import directly means it's going to retrieve it from the source system, page out the results, the IDs, queue them up in the migration database, and we're going to put it in here. So I'm going to click import directly. So I have a few batches created. It's 154 items, easily taking a couple million at a time here. No challenge. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to go back to the job manager and fetch batches. And you can see here that we have a number of batches. We have some that were imported that I did as a demo earlier. And these are all in export ready state. So they're pending the export. So that's everything you need to do for the job setup and queuing items into the system. Now it's all about exporting them, transforming them, importing. These jobs normally run in the background. I want to move on to the agent or the bots. The agent and the bots, they just run in the background, like I said. Normally they run on Task Scheduler or Windows Service, but there's nothing to see. So I want to show you guys something here as part of this demo. I'm going to pull up the command line window. And then I'm going to go ahead and run the command itself. So I have something that's going to run the export. Now what I should mention here is that these jobs are already running. So if you're running this tool and you create some batches, that's great. There's nothing to do. But to show you for presentation purposes, I want to show you step by step what's happening behind the scenes and how we move from one state to another. But these would normally be running together. Same host or other hosts, it doesn't matter. So I have something over here that we're going to export from FileNet, and then we're going to import into OpenText. First thing I'm going to do is just fire this guy off. So I have my exporter here, I have my OT import, and normally, like I mentioned, you would set this up in Task Scheduler. Here's an example. You want this to run at a certain time of day. You could scale up and run it on a schedule, have multiple processes running after business hours, and then just limit them during business hours. This is configurable by you. You want to move this to another machine, you can export and import the task itself from Windows. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the export task. And while that's running, and if you had multiple exporters running, they would all be checking out the batches individually. Now what I'm going to do is go over to our batch directory and show you what's happening. I'll go over to our export. And if I fetch the batches here, you'll see that our state is already changing. We went from export ready to exported. Typical extraction rate from FileNet is very high, very well performing system, 30 to 40 documents a second, single threaded, very fast. So the batches came out. We'll go to one that we just exported here. That was a batch. Now I'm going to go into the items. And then you see here I have my content, I have a log, an INX file. Let me show you the INX file. It's interesting. This is all just Northwind or bogus data, so no PII here. Anyways, we have some other information. All the key value pairs, like I mentioned, of the property name, in this case it's FileNet symbolic name, and then we have a delimiter. This is what a null value looks like. This is all the metadata from the source. If you were troubleshooting something, if you had a problem with the document, you could always come over here to the batch directory and see where the document was that had an issue and start looking in this file, look for those crazy characters, look for something maybe the software missed or something that the user imported in the system. I'm going to close out our INX file here. I'm going to minimize this. And my next step, that was export. Now, if I had more batches that were running, they would continue processing and import would be running. As soon as something is exported, it would start importing. So, and now I'm going to fire off that import process. And we have our documents coming in here. A few features that I can share with you about the software I haven't covered yet. Here I'm looking at the batches again. You can see that these batches continue to import. Another feature that's in the software, as I mentioned earlier, is the analytics part. So I can go to library here and click on get statistics. Now, not just reporting, what's really important, especially for FileNet systems, is you may want to freeze the documents that are there. You don't want there to be any other changes, and you also want to check out report. So you can use this tool that will freeze the document versions, no longer allow metadata changes to those docs. Here I can click on documents by year. I can get my choice values or all my drop downs from the choice lists that are in the FileNet system and get a security report. The security report is going to show you, it's going to translate the bit mask entries, and here we just have all the values, anything that's translated, major version document, we have some integer values that are there. That's converting the bit mask to the individual rights, and we have the class name and type. And then field usage. Field usage is really good. This is the one that's going to look at the types of documents you have, tell you how many documents are there, and then the percentage of population of that field, of that column name that's in the database, how often it's used. And that will really tell you if that field is something that you should migrate or not. Of course, with all these values, you can save it. The other thing you can do here is you can click on proposed categories and attributes. It's going to take the information that's gathered here and then create them in your OpenText system. One of the things I could do is just click on a batch. I can go to batches here and I can open the selected batch. Here I can inspect these, and I can also change the state of the batch individually, like on the items, and then click update here. But I'm going to close out of this. And if I want to do this for a group, let's just say we were doing some exceptions and we want to do some retries, I could do this together, do batches, and then I could just change the state, change the batch status without even opening those. And I can click on that and reset or roll back a batch to a different state. Well, guys, I appreciate you hanging out with me, taking a look at BECM Solutions migration software for content management systems, FileNet, OpenText, Alfresco, Documentum, Synergy, maybe a few others I didn't mention, SharePoint, of course. Again, thanks for hanging out with me. Appreciate some comments and some feedback. Thank you very much.